going on? Joseph Bulmer here, and today we're going to start putting that Honda Valkyrie back together. Now I'm going to start with the back wheel. I've already put the new tire on. As you can see, I went from the Firestone all-season radial that was on here, which here in a minute I will have the video up on mounting this tire and explaining why I went to this tire. But this is a 195/75/16 Firestone Transforce CV, and I had a Firestone all-season radial at 205/65/16 on here. This one's a little narrower, about an inch and a half taller. Should bring my highway RPMs down a little more. But tonight, what we're going to do is we're going to replace our rear wheel bearings, and I'm also going to replace the bolts that hold the plate in for the drive dampers. So we've got a seal on this side that we're going to replace. We're going to replace both the wheel bearings. Now, keep in mind, on these bikes, you do not remove these wheel bearings for inspection purposes. They're steel bearings. If you can roll the bearing around and it's nice and free and it doesn't bind up and you don't feel it catching, the bearing's fine, leave it alone. I've got 103,000 miles on this bike, and these bearings are really stiff, which they shouldn't be, so we're going to pull them out and replace them just to be on the safe side. Now, do me a favor. While you're here, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell. That way you'll get notifications on all the videos I post in this series about fixing my Honda Valkyrie, because we're going to do it a little bit at a time so they don't get too long. And please share them with your friends. I do have another project bike over here that I'm going to be making videos for you guys on. It's a V-Star 650. Once I get it done, that one I'm probably going to sell. And then I'll always have something going on, because as you can see, I've got other bikes behind me. This one's my son's, that one's my wife's, my other son's bike's up in the barn, and I also have an 80 Goldwing that I think we're going to turn into a pretty interesting project here in the future, so stay tuned for that one as well. That one's my bike, and I've had it for quite a long time. I bought it in 2012, and I think we're going to do something pretty cool with that. But without further ado, let's see if we can get these wheel bearings out. Now, there is a special tool for removing the wheel bearings. Unfortunately, I could not find it online, so I have a blind hole bearing puller set from work that we're going to try and use and see if we can pop the bearings out that way. Hopefully this will work. Otherwise, I'm going to have to start searching around online and hopefully come up with the proper tool for this. But it looks like this is going to be a similar design, and that locked in nice and tight. So, all right. Now, the tool that you would normally use, basically it has a 4-fingered flange, just like a blind hole bearing puller, except you drive a chisel into the center to separate it and then drive the bearing out. This one, you just thread that down in. It's threaded into the center of the bearing, and we're going to thread the slide hammer on, and then we're going to pop these bad boys out of here with any luck. Now keep your fingers out of the way, because that will hurt. Alright guys, so after a whole lot of working, a bit of cussing, some beating, and a sore hand, Oh, and there may have been a little cousin in there. Managed to get the bearings out. Now, there's two different bearings. There's a thicker bearing and a thinner bearing. The thicker bearing goes on the drive side. The thinner bearing goes on the brake side with the dust shield, and it's very important to remember this. Now, as you can hear, that bearing is getting a little noisy. So 103,000 miles. That was expected. Hit them with some penetrating oil. It helped a little bit. And once I got the first one out, I was able to go through the wheel and drive the other one out really, really easily. Now, I'm going to wipe out the bores, get all the crud out of the bores. And then, I'm going to have to find my bearings. Find the proper bearings. Okay, there's, oh no, that's fork bushing. There's my double roller bearing, which is part number, this is Honda part number 91053-MN5. That's Mike November 5-003. Okay, that is the double roller bearing. That goes on the drive side. The single roller bearing is, oh, this is definitely my rear bearing. Then I need to find my seal. Hopefully you guys can see this. I'm on the Cheap Cycle Parts website, and to double check my part numbers, I'm just going to scroll down to rear wheel, and open that up, and then we can blow up. We're looking at the brake side, so it's fuzzy as crap, but that should be, I believe that's number 18. Should, down here in our list, 18 is a dust seal, and it gives us the part number right there. I'm going to double check that, and that should be the correct one. So that is 91253-443-762. That's our seal. So we're going to take our 44.5mm bearing and seal driver from my good old Maddox, i.e. Harbor Freight bearing and seal driver kit. I actually just bought this a little while back, and this is one hell of a nice kit. It's actually, I've used it several times already. I'm going to set our bearing on there and find our hammer. And you want to make sure you put the force on the outside race of the bearing. You don't want to be in the center. And just bend. There we go. She's seated. Now I'm going to swap out to my next larger size for the seal. I'll set that off to the side because I'll need that again here in a minute. But for the seal, I'm going to go a little bit bigger because I don't want to overdrive the seal. I just want to drive it flush with the top of the hub. So that bearing's driven in nice and flush. All the seal's nice and flush. Now we're going to flip it over. And before we drive this one in, we need to put our spacer. Now, just wipe it off, make sure it's clean. But our spacer has to go down through the center. Line up on the other side. And then we can drive our bearing on this side in. This one we can actually use the larger bearing driver for because this does not, it basically drives flush. It does not have a seal here because there's an O-ring that we're going to put in here later. So we'll deal with that when we get to reassembling the final drive. There we go. That bearing's all the way in. It's nice and free. And we need to align our spacer just a little bit. Not a big deal. That's much better than the old bearing. The old bearings were really stiff. So, we've got that taken care of. I'm going to remove, if I can, I'll be golden white. I'm going to remove and replace these 5 bolts. So, to do that, let me sit this back down, get the proper Allen wrench. For this, you're going to need a 6mm Allen. We're going to need our, these are the bolts. That's your part number for the bolts. And here again, it's all OE Honda parts. I've got 103,000 miles on the first batch of OE Honda parts. We might as well. No reason to change horses in midstream. I already did replace the drive dampers here. Give me a second, I'll show you those. There are my drive dampers right here. Those are all brand new. Now, drop our plate back in. Once you drop it in order to lock the outside in place, let's get you some light here. In order to lock the outside in place, you have to rotate the whole plate. Easier said than done without catching your fingers somewhere you don't want to. Rotate it into position, just like that. And then we're going to start our new screws. Oh, they actually already came with thread locker on them. Perfect. Now, you want to get them all started before you tighten any of them up. That way if the holes are misaligned, you can still wiggle the plate around to, I just had to there, to line up the holes. If you start tightening them up, you'll inevitably be fighting them, or you'll have to go back and loosen them up. You don't want to get them too tight, where you run the risk of pulling the threads out of the wheel. Just run them down, get them down nice and snug, and the thread locker will keep them from vibrating loose. Those are all nice and tight. Everything is in. That wheel, aside from me putting the spacer, cleaning the spacer up, putting the spacer back inside of this side, and I'm going to wash that wheel off real well, maybe even take the brake rotor off and polish it out some. That wheel, a brand new tire, is ready to go back on the bike, guys. So hopefully that didn't get too long and tedious for you, but that is quick, easy way to replace the rear wheel bearings. Got that done. Now, I'm going to start working on the rest of the bike. Do me a favor though, subscribe if you haven't, share this video, don't forget to rate it, questions throw them in the comment section, and stay tuned for the next one where we're going to tear into something else on the rear end of this bike. So, thanks for watching, guys. Don't be afraid to get out there and get your hands dirty. You might have a little fun doing it. We will see you on the next one.